Is that what we needed? Somebody wiser than Solomon? Do we need a better teacher? We need somebody who would come, maybe be a little funnier than Solomon and maybe say things in a more pointed way, more tweetable. Is that what we really needed? No. We needed something altogether different than what Solomon was. You see, listen to this. The people of Israel thought that Solomon was the one that had been promised. God had promised David that one of his sons would bless the world, would bless Israel, would build a temple as a place to meet with God, and would bless the nations through them. And they thought, it's Solomon. It's got to be Solomon. But then they were bitterly disappointed because Solomon couldn't even rule himself. And see, that's where the beauty of the Old Testament really kicks in. Solomon was just a dim picture of a much greater son who was coming. When God promised David this son, and Israel assumed that it was Solomon and then figured out it wasn't, they were left with this big question. Who is this son? Who is this wise son who is going to make us wise and bring us blessing? Well, see, when you leave 1 Kings and you read through the rest of your Old Testament, you'll find out that centuries later, another son of David is going to show up. And that son possessed all the same wisdom that Solomon had, even more. People came from far and near to hear him. But the center of this son's life was not wise teaching. The center of this son's life was not a glitzy temple. The center of this son's life was him dying in shame in the place of sinners. And he would say that he was going to suffer for our foolishness so that he could forgive us and then put his spirit of wisdom into us so that we would not only understand the wise thing that we're supposed to do, but we would have the resurrection power to actually do it. You see, unlike Solomon, Jesus wasn't admired around the world for his wisdom and success. Jesus was hung up in shame where he was mocked as a fool, but because of that, he can restore wisdom to those of us like Solomon who've messed up our lives with foolishness. You can see this right there in 1 Kings chapter 11. You got to know how to read it, but it's there and it's beautiful. 1 Kings 11, since you've done this, Solomon, and you didn't keep my covenant and my statutes, which I commanded you, I will tear the kingdom away from you. In other words, there's a consequence for what you did, and I will give it to your servant. However, I will not do it during your lifetime. This is awesome. For the sake of your father David, I will tear it out of your son's hand. Keep going. Yet I will not tear the entire kingdom away from him. I'll give one tribe for your son, for the sake of my servant David, for the sake of the promise that I made to David. By the way, David, who was himself an adulterer and murderer, I'm not going to give you, Solomon, what you deserve. I'm not. For the sake of my servant David, I'm going to leave one tribe for your son and for the sake of Jerusalem that I chose. And that one tribe was called Judah. And see, centuries later, another son would be born to the tribe of Judah, and it was Jesus Christ, the son of David of the tribe of Judah, who was Christ the Lord. And he would come as the wisdom of Solomon. He would come as the riches of Egypt. He would come as the greatest thing that had ever come. God said, I am going to, even in the midst of all your foolishness, I'm going to give you somebody who will not just teach you, but somebody who will save you. And so when you mess up your life in foolishness, which you inevitably will, hope in him. As I was thinking just about Solomon's life, I'm reminded of one of my favorite verses in the New Testament that I don't know if the guy was, writer of Hebrews was thinking about Solomon, but man, it sure ties into his life. And it goes like this. It says, let us run with patience the race that is set before us. Let us lay aside every sin and the sin that so easily trips us up. What that means is don't be like Solomon. Don't get all the way to the end of your life and then let these small sins and compromises destroy you. Don't do that. But here's what it goes on to say. Look to Jesus, who is the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross and is sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. You know what that means? It's very important. It means you're running a race, and a lot of better runners than you have gotten tripped up and not made it. So what you're supposed to do is look to Jesus, who actually ran the race for you in your place. And Jesus won the race. And now he's sat down in the winner's circle, the right hand of God, and that's your place. The verdict on your life is in. You're the winner. Regardless of how you run from now on, you're a winner. Because Jesus Christ ran in your place, and he won the race in your place, he got the crown in your place, and when it came time for the award ceremony, he said, don't put it on my head, put it on theirs. So right now, you got Jesus' victory that is attached to you. And now he says, in light of that, because Jesus has ran the race perfectly for you and has put his spirit in you, you don't have to trip up anymore because Jesus can run successfully through you in a way Solomon never could. So look to him. He's the author and the finisher. He's the one that started it. He's the one that'll finish it. Don't look to be wiser than Solomon. Depend on Jesus to be all these things through you. You see, it is ironic. So this is the only people who actually get better in the Christian life are those who understand that their acceptance before God is not dependent on their getting better. It's when you realize that Jesus ran the race in your place and he won it for you that you suddenly develop the ability to run with wisdom. You've messed up your life through foolishness, just like Solomon did. And what I can offer to you is not, go back and do it again, get wiser. I'm not offering you teaching. What I'm offering you is hope. Hope is different than teaching. Because hope says Jesus did it in your place, and he did it so he could forgive you. He did it so he could restore you. He did it so that he could make you everything he wants you to be. So look to him and not yourself. Don't try to become wiser. Try to become more trusting of Jesus. You understand we make a huge mistake when we read these Old Testament stories and we say, how can I be wise like Solomon? How can I be brave like Daniel? How can I be a giant killer like David? That's not the point. The point is look to Jesus. And then you will become wise like David, wise like Solomon. You'll become brave like Daniel. You'll become a giant killer like David by trusting that the race has already been won.